within Conflict Transformation Research Program, I have been part of Opportunities for Prevention of Violent Extremism project that has been generously funded by German Federal Foreign Ministry. This project started in July of 2017. It goes on until end of June 2019. So it's a 2-year project. And within this project, what we wanted to do was we wanted to have a participatory research project. So basically, a project is basically falls on the nexus of participatory research and dialogue workshops. So what we did was we looked into 4 countries of the Balkans. So the 4 countries were the main focus of the project. And the countries are Kosovo, Albania, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Macedonia. In these countries, we partnered with the research organizations that already had a lot of expertise on violent extremism, studying violent extremism. And with them, we started the participatory research phase. And from the outset, we had regular team meetings where we jointly decided on the design of the project. So we co-designed the project with the partners. And this is how we ended up looking into vulnerable and resilient communities, or affected or unaffected communities by the phenomena of violent extremism. But the research was accompanied all along with dialogue, the consultation with community members through dialogue workshops, but also through different focus groups, and also through in-depth interviews. So there has to be more deep understanding of what happens in the communities. As we heard yesterday, these radical individuals come out of the communities, they go back to these communities. So it's important to know, to look into the meso level and to understand what goes on into the communities. So I think one of the main takeaways, I would say, was that more work needs to go into looking and researching deeper what happens in the communities, both affected communities by violent extremism, but also unaffected communities. And involving youth in particular from the outset into the project, like involving them in a project co-design, but also project research, and also project outputs and recommendations, and advocacy and outreach. It's really important, especially youth from a more kind of youth who sit on less accessible areas, or youth from less kind of beaten tracks. This goes the same with religious representatives. They should also be involved from the beginning of the projects, and in the projects from the beginning to help co-design the project, but also at the later stages as well. We have heard a lot of complaints coming from religious representatives that they're consulted kind of at one point, but then they're not brought in to co-design and co-decide on matters that, or issues that matter to the communities with regards to this topic. I think more analysis should go into looking into drivers of conflict and violence, but also or comparing them, or looking at the differences and commonalities of drivers of conflict and violence, but also drivers of violent extremism, as well as related fields such as resiliency. This we don't have deep understanding. So this would then help explain how come individuals end up being radicalized, and whether it has to do with ideology or whether it has to do with other factors and actors. We have found out that some of the factors and actors are similar in all these areas. For example, a lot of participants in these workshops talked about the lack of trust in institutions, and then talked about lack of trust in religious institutions. They talked about the lack of abilities of local institutions to deal with the problem, to face the problem, not only to prevent it, but also to counter it. So these were main similarities that came across the board, so to speak. Other similarities were lack of opportunities. When people feel marginalized and isolated, they, as we heard yesterday from, I think it was David Weber, they look for other issues or causes so that they can feel satisfied. So once they start feeling marginalized, isolated, lack of opportunities, which is what we hear constantly in the countries in the Western Balkans, there lack of opportunities, huge youth unemployment, especially in Bosnia and Kosovo, then I think they start looking for other alternative ways to somehow feel satisfied with their life or feel that they have perspective. And of course they end up with, being involved with wrong ideas, but mainly it stems from these factors and actors that I mentioned, and they seem to come up across the regions, not only in one particular region or in one particular place.